The truth will set you free. The truth will set you free.
Well, despite our natural tendency to think otherwise, obedience to God will usually make life less chaotically difficult and will also make us more free, not less free. I'm Peter Franson from christiangeekcentral.com and Spirit Blade Productions. Right now I'm going to attempt to examine the Bible and dissect some of the churchy language we can easily take for granted, digging into history and languages as I'm able anyway, to try and get at the heart of the text so that we can hopefully see and then apply at least some of what God has for you and me in these words today. Now, I am not formally trained in Scripture. I'm just a guy using resources and a questioning mind to try and get at the truth, and that's something that we can all do, so I hope that you'll do that with me. We're studying our way through the book of Proverbs, and we've arrived at chapter 11, verses 5 through, it was going to be 6. It was going to be 7. I decided to just do 6 because I might be getting sick, and so I was like, let's wrap up my notes, let's get this recorded in case I tank in a day or two. But yeah, Proverbs 11, 5 and 6 in the ESV that says, "The righteousness of the blameless keeps his way straight, but the wicked falls by his own wickedness. The righteousness of the upright delivers them, but the treacherous are taken captive by their lust." As geeks, we can feel like other humans are aliens and life makes no sense. That's a big part of why I wanted to do this study of Proverbs, which we've been kind of coming in and out of between doing other books of the Bible. But in our study of Proverbs, we're aiming to understand just the nature of this life and of relationships, social interactions, and just in general what it looks like to live in the perspective and purposes that God intends for us. To that end, in Proverbs, like these here, we see labels like righteous and wicked to help contrast between two paths we can take as we endeavor one moment at a time to take steps down the path of wisdom. But it's important to note that these are kind of like prototypical paths. No one is just the righteous. No one is just the wicked or the fool or, whatever. We're just identifying paths here that we want to try and increasingly be on or avoid. So again, Proverbs 11:5 says, "The righteousness of the blameless keeps his way straight, but the wicked falls by his own wickedness." The Hebrew word for righteousness here refers to being ethically right. The Hebrew word for blameless refers to having integrity here, being stable and unimpaired by sin. And the idea of his way being straight here in the Hebrew refers to being smooth and clear of obstacles. So the idea behind the first half of this proverb, "The righteousness of the blameless keeps his way straight," is that those who are unimpaired by sin will tend to find that their choices to live morally will also lead to fewer difficulties and complications in life. And from the second half of the proverb, we can infer that the difficulties and obstacles they avoid are specifically generated by wickedness. So in other words, even though Proverbs, just in general, are already not meant to be these assumed laws of reality that have no exceptions, Ecclesiastes makes it clear there are definitely exceptions. But on top of that understanding, this proverb is also implicitly and specifically talking about avoiding problems caused by sin itself. So the rest of that proverb says, "But the wicked falls by his own wickedness." The Hebrew word for wicked in the first half of that phrase can refer here to sin against humans or God. However, the related Hebrew word for wickedness at the end of that phrase more specifically refers to sin against other humans. And the Hebrew word for fall here refers to experiencing ruin in life just kind of falling apart, going south in major ways, or even dying. So it seems to me that the idea here is that the person who sins, whether that's against God or other people, but they just kind of like living in that mode of life, they're going to tend to experience ruin or even death as a result of their sin against other people. Now, this isn't the expression of a cosmic law like the karma of Eastern religions. It's a principle of life that is often as simple as detectable cause and effect. So a hard reality this proverb, I think, is asking us to accept is that we may experience major ruin and misfortune in our lives that can ultimately be traced, at least in part, to our sin against one or more people. A sobering reason to take stock and ask ourselves in times of difficulty Can I identify any way in which I have contributed to my difficult situation because of selfish or sinful choices I made that affected someone else? The insecurity that's common to so many geeks can keep us from a true willingness to go through that process of self-examination, to see our sin and to fully own up to it. But this kind of self-examination is actually easier to do not under the time of the old covenant when these proverbs were written, but under the new covenant of forgiveness, mercy, and grace that Jesus provided. We're equipped, we're in a much better position to apply these proverbs and take this hard look at ourselves, because we can look at our sin fully in the face, knowing that because of Christ, it does not define us, it does not affect our worth in any way. Instead, we can see a starting point for a course correction that will take us down a smoother life path with fewer obstacles and difficulties that result from our sin. And that's the path that God lovingly wants for his children. 11:6 then says, "The righteousness of the upright delivers them, but the treacherous are taken captive by their lust." Now, this proverb has a basic idea in common with the last one. Righteousness tends to help us avoid trouble. Sin tends to get us in trouble. But this proverb is distinct in its specifics. As in verse 5, righteousness here refers to being ethically right. So we're looking at the first phrase, the righteousness of the upright delivers them. As in Proverbs 11:3, upright here means straight, level, straightforward, and correct. Seems to refer to someone who is authentic and authentically good. Someone who doesn't just know what God says and what he desires, but who is shaped by God's desires so that their most inward thoughts and desires are actually molded and changed away from what comes naturally to us. The right living of this kind of person even rescues them from a premature death, which is the meaning behind delivers them in the Hebrew here. And then the second half of that phrase, that proverb, "But the treacherous are taken captive by their lust." As in Proverbs 11:3, the treacherous here in Hebrew refers to someone who operates deceitfully to get what they want. They're just willing to compromise and manipulate and take whatever path to get what they want. This kind of person is said to be taken captive by their lust, which in Hebrew conveys the idea that they will be trapped by just general sinful desires, not limited to sinful sexual desires, but any kind of sinful desires. And this idea that our sinful desires could be a trap, could take us captive, stands in such strong opposition to the natural thinking preached to us in commercials and various forms of entertainment. Have you noticed just subtle preaching of that kind of message that portray the pursuit of sinful desires as freeing, as fulfilling? In our fallen condition, also being influenced daily by being in a fallen world, we tend to think of God's laws in terms of restriction and limitation that keep us from freedom. But sinful desires actually capture and dominate us. The more we give in to sinful desires, the more our appetite for them increases, and the more intense our pursuit of them becomes. Now, this can include, it's important to know, legitimate pleasures, like various forms of entertainment that start as blessings in a proper place of priority. I've seen this happen with me in my gaming hobby from time to time. It starts as a legitimate pleasure in a proper place of priority, but then shifts in my mind to become something that I feel entitled to have whenever I feel a desire for it. And that's just the nature of taking that first wrong step into over-prioritizing even things that are normally good. And then the result is increasingly this way of living that is less and less free to choose anything other than our immediate desires. And our capacity to live purposeful, meaningful lives lessens, weakens under the captive hold our desires have on us. So the implicit warning here is to recognize sinful desires for what they truly are and determine not to be enslaved by them. If you would like some help finding a good church in your area, I would love to help you do that if I can. Online resources and communities are good supplements, but by their very nature, they can't speak to your particular situation like relationships in a local church can. The context for almost everything in the New Testament assumes that we are serving and building purposeful relationships in a local church. So whether you're in a church that lacks Bible-based intentionality or maybe not attending any church at all right now, if I can help you get connected to an authentic, compassionate, Bible-oriented church, I would love to do that. Email me, please, paeter@spiritblade.com, and we can try to look at some websites of churches in your area together.